So we'll break down Kevin Nash and Triple H in a cell, and you being the referee. But first, I want to ask about what Dave wrote here. He writes, Foley at first was coming in just for the pay-per-view and 2 TVs with the idea of plugging his book on the second TV appearance. He had such good timing returning that he immediately agreed to work with the house shows as a referee as well. Originally, he was to do the June 16th Raw, but also added the 23rd since it's MSG, and now there's a good chance he'll appear from time to time on TV going forward because he enjoyed his return. The idea from the company standpoint is for him to wrestle later in the year, coming out of retirement at this point, for a street fight style match with Randy Orton. The idea is they're going to try to make Orton into another Rock level superstar. If you go with the idea they have to try it with someone, he's not a bad guy to try with. Of course, the odds are great he can't be The Rock because few guys in history can. Orton didn't have the presence to be a star at that level before a crowd last week, but with a new video entrance linked with Flair and Triple H and the mega push, particularly the interaction with Foley on Raw, it did seem to be changing fast. It's funny because that same link and same interaction with Foley would have made half the guys on the roster. Orton isn't a bad choice because he's 21 or 22 and barring injury should be a huge star as he picked things up fast in OVW. But this is why when I hear people say that you have to get yourself over and the company can't book you to become a star and that there are nothing the guys' complaints about not getting a push, boy, that's a load. While natural charisma plays a part, fans' reactions are based on how the company presents you. This company killed Goldberg. They can make Orton. It's not 100% and verbal ability and charisma play a part, but company presentation overrides all of that. The plan for Orton is to work with and go over Shawn Michaels, I'm guessing SummerSlam, and for Michaels to establish him as a great wrestler. The idea would then be his next program would be with Foley, with the idea that Foley can put him over and make the fans take Orton seriously as a brawler. And then given his work in helping make Kane, Rock, and Triple H into bigger stars, they're kind of giving The Undertaker a career rebirth when he was on the verge of getting stale. Foley himself has talked about wrestling one more match if he can get into shape, but he talks about it as if it was WrestleMania. Still, he's on TV, clearly positioning himself for a match with Orton. So how did the Orton thing come to be?
Well, this is at a time when I could have a phone call with Vince and be in his office the next day pitching it. I was one of only like 3 or 4 guys who wasn't in Florida.
Yeah.
I guess Taker was in Austin, Texas, right? Kane was in Knoxville. But basically, you know, there's 2 or 3 guys in the Northeast. So I'm only 90 minutes with traffic away from WWE. The first time I went in to meet with Mr. McMahon, I could literally see the smokestacks from Port Jefferson, which is the town next to the one I grew up in. So that was something we had in common. And so I could make the phone call, say I want to pitch something, and it would be just him or just him and JR. Or at a certain point it became him and John Laurinaitis. So I know it's Vince. I can't tell you for a fact if JR's there or John's there at that point. He's okay, what you got, pal? I said, Vince, I'd like to enter the Royal Rumble and win it. And because I am neither a Raw or SmackDown guy, I would like to challenge both champions into a 3-way dance to unify the WWE title and win that as well. And he looked at me and said, Mick, I have no interest whatsoever in doing that. I said, okay, I've got this idea for Randy Orton. And so Vince had this yellow legal pad, and I start giving him ideas. And it centers around walking away from a match, having a crisis in confidence, which I had never seen in wrestling. But we do have in real life.
Ric Flair.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had a crisis in confidence that day for sure. And I started saying, and once I leave, Randy will try to goad me back in with like political attack ads. And I guess political attack ads were not as omnipresent as they are now.
Right.
He said, attack ads. I said, yeah, everyone hates those ads. Like Mick Foley claims to be the hardcore legend. Yeah. But is he really? And he starts writing all this stuff down, and at the proper time, we make plans to do this match that I will walk out on. with Randy, something that's never been seen before, and then he will goad me back out of retirement, taking a little page from Rocky II, where Rocky was retired. Apollo wants him back, and he's got the Apollo Creed versus the Italian Chicken, and then the guys at the gym were down on Rocky. He was carrying spit buckets, and then it's like, he comes back to Mickey, who at first is forbid him from fighting because of his damage to his eye, and then Mickey says, "I say we knock his block off," and then thus begins, the road to redemption for Rocky. But for me, I'm going to just flat out refuse to wrestle. But the night before we pull the trigger on that angle, Stephanie calls me and says, "Mick, we're going to go a different way." I said, "What different way?" And she says, "We're going to have Evolution jump you." I said, "What happened to me backing out of the match?" She said, "My dad doesn't think the fans will ever forgive you." I said, "Let me talk to your dad." So I call him up, and he recites with Stephanie, "Mick, you just work so hard. I'd hate for you to go out this way. The last people think, I just don't think they're going to forgive you." I said, "Vince," I'd heard he was a Western enthusiast. I said, "Have you seen the movie Shane?" He goes, "Oh, well, yeah." I said, "Go back and watch it and tell me how good that movie would have been if Shane accepts the challenge the first time." Because it's all about that movie's all about this former gunfighter rediscovering, finding that dark place in his soul that he's tried to hide for so long. If they just said, "Shane, you gutless coward," all right, and now we're 30 minutes in and we've got no movie. And he said he's going to trust my judgment. He disagreed with me. He thought there was a good chance it would ruin my career, but that if I felt that strongly about it, he would let me do it my way. And then the big challenge became trying to talk Randy into hocking a loogie on me. He later became really adept at it, right? But that first time, he's like, man, Mick, I was like, "Randy, you have to do it." And I think he said something about like that. Couldn't I just? I said, "We got to be able to see it. If we can't see it, it's not as nearly as meaningful." And he was like, he was so against it because he didn't want to be that disrespectful.
Right.
And I said, "You've got to do it. You've got to do it." And what was so fun was to be part of that whole building process. Because I guess I'll do the loogie first, and then we'll talk about more of the building process, if that's all right.
Yeah.
We get in there, and this is where I borrow a little bit from the original Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds, when Burt is contemplating putting the jersey back on and leading the Mean Machine. And he asks an inmate who had been, I think, a former football player, and he was a lifer because he'd taken a swing at a guard. And Burt says, "Was it worth it?" And he says, "Yeah, to me it was." So I'm in the role of Burt Reynolds, Shawn Michaels in the role of this grizzled lifer, and I'm asking Shawn about coming back. I think it was the year before against Triple H. And we do that. Was it worth it? And he goes, "To me it was." And then real dramatically, I say, "Get me my flannel." Get me my flannel.
Brian loved that line.
Did he?
I'm sure. He had to. That feels like he would have written that.
No, that's a Foley one right there, yeah. And so here we go. Push comes to shove. I've got an expert in Vince saying it's going to be the death knell to my career. I feel in my heart like the fans, I've accrued enough goodwill for them to take a wait-and-see attitude. I come out, it's for the IC title, which I never won. I do the slow lap around the ring, and then I just keep on walking up that aisle. And now we're live, when Randy confronts me, and I can't remember the exact verbiage, but you're walking away, you're nothing but a coward. And then just as I had urged him to do, he dug down deep as far into his lungs as he could, got something with a yellowish green tinge to it, and he hocked that loogie right on my face. And you could feel the fan. They want me to respond. You know, they really want me to. I don't know if we've ever had a loogie of that magnitude. You know, that I'm sure. Well, other than when the Brett hocked up on Vince.
But that scene is still so memorable. I can describe it in my mind. I remember it. I mean, I didn't just watch it this week for prep. I think all of us remember that because it did cross the line a little bit of what's allowed in wrestling and what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful about it, one of the things, I think this may have been the best thing I was involved with over, as far as one of my ideas being played out, is that when I left, that was December 10th, somewhere around that area, early December, maybe December 3rd, Randy basically had 6-7 weeks to build up for my return. And that's when those political attack ads started airing. And not only did they do what I asked, they like went over what I would have thought possible. You know, it was like, I think they concluded with going, the truth is Mick Foley is nothing more than a little bitch.
Oh, wow.
So I did come back at the Rumble. I think I had to eliminate Test backstage to get a spot. And then I told Randy, I said, man, we've got so much realism in this angle. So when you and I exchange punches, let's really bring him in there. He's like, look at him. I said, yeah, make him real, man. People can tell the difference. And the thing about it, Conrad, is when we got out there, we were swinging for the fences, nobody really could tell the difference. They look like crappy working punches, what they look like. And also, despite the fact that I've been training at that time for like 4 months, and I think I dropped about 40 pounds at that time. I would go from 330 to 270. And I worked a total of like 6 months by the time worked to transform myself, for a total of 6 months by the time that WrestleMania match took place. But even given that, I was blown up within 30 seconds. Within 30, because there's nothing like it, you know? It's
right.
One thing to be on a treadmill or a bike. It's another thing to be in there with the crowd and the nerves. So, you know, despite the fact nobody could tell that the punches were real, and if anything looked worse than the working punches, it was intense, and it got us to that next level.